some of you listening on the radio may have heard some talk in the background concerning sales. When you watch us on Facebook Live, I mean, a lot of times I turn on the microphone a little bit early. I turn on the broadcast. You can see some of the behind the scenes, the prep work that we do right here on Tri-City Sports Now. I speak mainly of the royal we. I'm Mark E. Bilson. I do the show myself. I do the research. I book the guests. For the most part, the staff has in the past booked a guest or two. We've had consultants who've recommended guests. We've had, I know when it first started out, we had Maria True's, one of her relatives was booking guests. And it first started out, I remember, and he didn't know anything about sports. He was just booking local people and all. And I'm thinking, okay, this kind of makes sense because, you want to make good with the locals for sponsorship, obviously. But initially, there was another host there, and they would just talk about the business for 20 minutes on a sports talk show. And I was like, and I would call him up and said, look, this is not going to work unless you know something about sports. And say, yeah. And I said, what do you say we got an 8-minute conversation. What do you say we talk about sports for 7 minutes? And then in the last minute, we talk about your business. And everybody agreed to that, except the one person who did, why you booked this person on a sports talk show, I'll never know. But they did not know sports. But what they did know, I think it was Battle of Bristol week, and just we could talk about what that was doing for their business. So, there you go. Is it going to be Pruitt? Is it going to be Tucker? Is it going to be Steele? Kevin Steele, and I think a lot of people that's the guy they don't want. The reason being, he didn't have a very successful tenure at Baylor. Number two, he, as the defensive coordinator of Auburn, okay, it's Auburn, but you're thinking that's a team that lost 3 games. That's the team that didn't win the SEC. Iron Bowl championship or no, that's not the guy from the national champion. What happened to Brent Venables, by the way? There's some talk, by the way, that Brent Venables will join Chad Morris in Arkansas as his defensive coordinator. That would be a coup. That would be a big coup for Arkansas. And we talk about hierarchy in the SEC. I was thinking about this before we get to the offensive coordinator. But first I want to end this thing. This is our little story right here. Kevin Steele did not attend the 2017 Broyles Award ceremony. You give that to the top assistants. And it went actually to the Tony Elliott. Tony Elliott is co-offensive coordinator, running backs coach at Clemson. But instead he went up to New York City and interviewed Kevin Steele for the Tennessee job. Doesn't look like it did him a lot of good, but that's what they're saying that it was. So I don't know. Steele kind of has gone to the back burner beyond Jeremy Pruitt, defensive coordinator at Alabama. I wondered about, when this whole thing started, what about the offensive coordinator at Alabama? Doesn't look like it. Fulmer wants to think defense. Kind of interesting, considering that he was an offensive lineman. I generally think, not that I'm totally opposed to hiring defensive coordinators as head coaches, but I am of the school that says, the innovation, the rules of the game now going more and more to favor the offense, certainly in the pros. But I still think the college ranks as well overall. And so you're a little bit better getting a offensive coordinator, T. Martin, than you are a defensive coordinator. If all things are equal. Now, we've been theorizing here about T. Martin. Why can't he get an interview? And evidently, Fulmer finally did, perhaps as a courtesy, reach out to him. And maybe it is that he's still a nice guy. That people don't think he can be, insider. Maybe this is that doesn't have that football coach's personality that, takes the bull by the horns. You're going to play here. No, Ryder, you're wrong. That guy that you got to be sometimes as a football coach. Maybe the feeling is he doesn't have that. The old Star Trek episode, Enemy Within. It was bad Kirk that was the one that could lead. Remember? And the good Kirk had his intellect, but bad Kirk was the guy that, he was the guy that could make the decision, and to hell with whatever anybody thought about it. You got to do that when you're a leader sometimes. Anyway, it looks like Steele didn't attend the award ceremony. That's not a big deal that you don't attend if you're up for a job, come on. But he did, there was some talk maybe he would be the coach there. But now, the rumor of the hour, which is what we've been looking at for the last 2 weeks or so, really since the end of the Vanderbilt game, has been what's next. How many different coaches? Now maybe Jeremy Pruitt. Maybe there's a bit of a focus there. Who knows? I do want to talk about the offensive coordinator. Kurt Roper is out at South Carolina. Jake Bentley threw a few too many picks this year for my liking. I think that South Carolina, and I've said this, I actually think in SEC pecking order, South Carolina ranks ahead of UT these days, which I know is blasphemy to people that remember, 13 straight victories against the Gamecocks, that remember South Carolina being, if you really want to go back, a bad ACC program. But things have changed. Nobody has benefited more from conference expansion that occurred basically when Arkansas joined the SEC, and for that matter when Penn State joined the Big Ten 25 years ago. Nobody's benefited from that more than South Carolina. Yeah, Arkansas isn't quite the power hiring Chad Morris. But they're still not the power they were in the old SWC. You look at this. Missouri's picked up a lot. Is some of that because they joined the SEC? Perhaps. But that growth began back in the Big 12. Texas A&M can't win the West. I'm just looking locally right here. But since the Connecticut got really, the end of the day, they got to play football in the American. They're not even listed as a Power 5, even with the best women's basketball program in the country. So they haven't fared well. And Nebraska hasn't fared well in conference realignment. I don't know if Maryland really has. Maryland used to be, that's a tough team to beat in the ACC. Now that's an also ran in the Big Ten. You tell me. Penn State hasn't won the national title since they joined the Big Ten. They're really thought of behind Michigan and Ohio State, maybe even Wisconsin. They struggle to beat Michigan State these days, that big land-grant trophy. Anyway, the point that I'm trying to make here is South Carolina, getting back there, more players in South Carolina than Tennessee. Nobody's going to one school or the other because of nosebleed seats. Nobody. I can see that you'd go to Tennessee over Vanderbilt because Vanderbilt plays in a 40,000-seat stadium and Tennessee in a 100,000-seat stadium. But I don't think the difference between 80-odd thousand and 100-odd thousand really makes that big of a difference. Incidentally, by the way, I pointed this out. They did the college football ratings, speaking of Columbia, South Carolina, and Knoxville, Tennessee. And both of those municipalities were in the top 10 highest ratings in college football this year. Maybe bring it down and post it on our Facebook page, which maybe you're watching us on now. But, yes, 1420 NBC Sports Radio Tri-Cities. Like us on Facebook, and you can actually watch the show live here as I do this. But the most watched TV market in the country for college football, according to ESPN, this past year, this isn't a surprise. Number 1, Birmingham. It's not a surprise. Number 2, Columbus, Ohio. That's not a surprise. Number 3 was Columbia, South Carolina. That's really not that much of a surprise either. I used to live in Columbia. I know the passion there. I also know the passion in Knoxville. They were in the top 10 as well. I believe Knoxville was 5th. But in a 4-8 year, I mean, it's one thing for Birmingham in a year where Alabama is number one for most of the year. They're a second away from winning a national championship. They're in the middle of a dynasty. They may win the national championship this year. And got the, guy who, well, I was going to say, come to think of it, they've got, players that people know, all this. Yeah, you'd expect Birmingham. And then you've got Auburn right there as well. Sure, you'd expect that to be a market that would watch all the college football games. Same thing with Columbus, certainly. Ohio State, obviously, winning the Big Ten. They've got a big, obviously huge following. The one market in the top 10 that I saw that was surprised by was Jacksonville. But I think that's more of, the Florida perspective. But, Florida and Florida State both stunk this year. And it's not like Jacksonville has their own team. But then again, you think about it, where do they play the cocktail party? Georgia has a good year. They're in there as well. I was a bit surprised at Jacksonville because obviously they're not watching Jacksonville Dolphins games on ESPN for that top 10 rating. Jacksonville was the 9th rated market. But there you go. Anyway. Back to South Carolina. They're losing their offensive coordinator, Kurt Roper. Missouri needs a new offensive coordinator, as Josh Heupel went to become the coach at Central Florida. As a supposed insider did not know, Randy Shannon, by the way, joining the Golden Knights as Heupel's defensive coordinator. That's a big pickup for them. Of course, coordinators, I would imagine that Larry Scott will be out at Tennessee, probably Bob Shoop as well. Could you possibly see him retaining their positions, really? But, and what's going on in Ole Miss? We've got Ole Miss may be losing Shea Patterson. Talk about that in the next segment. But with Roper leaving South Carolina, and for that matter, Tennessee maybe needing a new offense coordinator, Missouri maybe. You got to wonder about Matt Canada down at LSU. Matt Canada expressed some interest in the Rice job. He didn't get it. And by Rice, I mean the head coaching job. There's some rumors that he might be interested in the Louisiana Lafayette coaching position, but I don't think he would be. That'd be a pay cut. He's making more than $1 million a year at LSU. He's said to be unhappy there. Could you see a Matt Canada, who I think is a really good offensive coordinator? He's the guy who basically transformed Nathan Peterman from the person that you saw stink out the joint a few years ago to Florida to an NFL quarterback. I know he didn't fare well in his start. He may be starting this week for Buffalo. Tyrod Taylor hurt. And I think that Peterman will do far better. But anyway, that was Matt Canada. That was his offense. That was one of his projects, was Nathan Peterman. And you turn him into a pro quarterback, well, he's pretty good. I think that if Matt Canada leaves LSU, that'll be the beginning of the end for Ed Orgeron. Much like when Mike DeBoard, to go back home to Indiana, no football coach leaves Tennessee to go to Indiana on a lateral move. I can see you're a coordinator and you go there to be the head coach. But Indiana, we can talk about where Tennessee ranks now in the SEC. I know this. The Tennessee job does rank ahead of Indiana. In fact, I would go so far to say I think every job in the SEC is a better job than Indiana. But then again, it is Power 5. I don't know, what do you think the worst job in a Power 5 would be? I might say Kansas. Right after that, I might say Indiana. Basketball schools. Never going to give you the benefit of the doubt as the football coach. You're going to be an afterthought to the basketball program. Yet Mike DeBoard left UT last year to go to the... He wants to go close to home. His hometown is 2 hours from Bloomington. He's not going back home. It's like saying, I'm from Knoxville. I'm going to move to Johnson City. It doesn't work that way. Actually, it's not even that. I'm going to move to Bristol, Virginia. Tri-City Sports Now. But anyway, look for that. Matt Canada with these jobs in the SEC opening up. that could be a big hire for a South Carolina, for a Tennessee, for a Missouri. Could be a very big hire. So take a look at that and follow up Matt Canada. And if Matt Canada does leave LSU, it's just like, as I said, Mike DeBoard leaving Butch Jones. That was the beginning of the end for Butch Jones. That would be, in my opinion, the beginning of the end for Ed Orgeron if Matt Canada left him to go to another program. And if Canada went to a place like South Carolina, which has a Jake Bentley that he can work with, oh, look out for the Gamecocks next year. Look out for the game. 8-4 this year. Look out for the Gamecocks next year. I'm just theorizing. I don't have any inside. It's not going out on the internet and all this, but yeah, just something to watch. Just something to watch. Okay? Tri-City Sports Now coming back. The one thing I wanted to talk a little bit about as I look here, let's talk a little bit about the Chad Morris hire at Arkansas. This is a college, we're all theorizing. Morris going to Arkansas, when Tennessee expressed interest, this shows me two things. First of all, that Tennessee might not be the job that the loyal fan base really thinks it is. The loyal fan base is a blessing and a curse for Tennessee. It's a blessing in that, to be brutally honest with you, it's what helps Tennessee go 9-4, not this last year, but the 2 years before then, because those are the demands for the Tennessee fans. They still believe that this is 1998. It's not, and that's the curse, because it's not. Because 9-4 doesn't become good enough anymore, when the fact of the matter is you haven't done that in 10 years. When the fact of the matter is, I've had callers call up this show, I think Tennessee should win the SEC East 3 out of 10 years. That's not the law of averages. How are you doing that with not only Florida and Georgia in the conference, in the division, but with Missouri, which won it twice, and South Carolina, which hasn't won it but one time, but finished second this past year. They won 33 games in 3 years, that sort of thing. How are you going to do that with those guys in the... It's a very highly competitive conference. Now, if you're Florida, maybe. That's where the players are. We get that. If you're Tennessee, when you're 5-20 the last 25 years against Florida, and why are you 5-20 the last 25 years ago? Well, it's been bad coaching. Really? Phil Fulmer? Bad coach? You can just name him the AD. No, it's because there are 33 players in the NFL. I say it all the time. 33 players from Tennessee in the NFL. Opening day, 201 out of Florida. Yeah, maybe you'll get a Lamar Jackson to leave. Maybe he doesn't like Florida. I don't know. I want to see the snow of Louisville. Okay, fine. But the fact of the matter is Jackson's a 4-star quarterback. If he's a 5-star, he's probably going and having a U on his helmet about right now. Maybe he's playing in Gainesville. Maybe he's playing in Tallahassee, and Jimbo Fisher is still the coach there. Who knows? If he's a 5-star. That's college recruiting. That shows you. Jackson wouldn't be a 5-star player. You tell me. It shows you that sometimes they get it wrong there, and that, maybe, just maybe, we put a little bit too much stock into the rankings of college football players coming out. Yeah, Shea Patterson. Maybe the best returning quarterback in the SEC, but will he return to the SEC? There's a distinct chance he may be moving up to the north side, or northern state. I'll tell you who and why. Tri-City Sports Now.
Back against all those